Hello, and welcome to the Writers and Illustrators of the Future podcast. This is John Goodwin, your host. This podcast is dedicated to the aspiring writer and artist and will provide inspiration and tips from top professionals in the field. If you've been listening to this podcast, or if you're new to it, I thank you very much. I would also appreciate if you took a moment and followed it on whatever platform you use to listen to your podcasts. I have a very special friend as a guest this week. Todd McCaffrey I met via his mom, Ann, who was a lovely woman who was one of the first judges for the Rise of Future contest. And actually, I guess I should say his mom, not his mom. Anyway, Todd has been I guess he's continued on with his mother's legacy on both as a judge for the Writers of the Future contest and as a New York Times bestselling author with the Dragon Riders of Pern universe, as well as the many stories he's co-authored with the Winter Twins and that he's created in his own universes as well. So, because I read a couple of the books in the Twin Souls series, so I am prepared to talk about that a bit as well. So I'm happy to introduce Todd, who is also, just so y'all know, he's also an honorable mention in the Illustrators of the Future contest. So he's a man of all seasons. Welcome, Todd.
Hey, John, thanks for having me. And yes, I was wondering if you're going to mention that honorable mention thing. I'm still chuffed about it. I'm waiting to see what next quarter brings. It's Brianna Winner who said, and I'm going to quote her badly, but she said something like, if you're creative, then you're probably creative in many different fields. And I took that as a challenge with art. In fact, it was Britt Winner who encouraged me to consider applying for a Master of Fine Arts degree, which I got in 2018 from Claremont Graduate University.
Wow.
So it's been fun. Yeah.
That's amazing. So have you always been an artist, but just never really let it blossom, and then this positive influence from the Winter Twins helped that blossom? Or were you always just kind of like dabbling in it and just waiting for that right moment?
I had some bad advice when I was a kid. I was told that because my straight lines weren't completely straight, I could obviously not become an artist. So it took me a number of years to overcome that particular parental advice, not my mother. I had taken some art classes at the local community college in Norco and had gotten encouragement also from one of the professors who was teaching me, which really helped and helped break it out. But I started off as a mechanical engineer, and all the original engineers, all the greats, you go back to Da Vinci, Archimedes, Newton, they were all excellent artists, at least for sketches and more. And so I think the two overlap.
It makes sense that it would, because it's that whole creative bent to a personality, to a mindset that you want to be able to do that. And that's great that you can. We've had, I guess, maybe half a dozen, not even that many, maybe it's only like 4 winners who have done both contests. They've been a winner in both the writer and the illustrator. It's an amazing skill that somebody can, if they can actually do it. And so I'm totally impressed with your ability to do this.
Well, thank you. Yes, and I'm going to keep on trying. As Joni Labaki famously says, an honorable mention means keep trying. You're close.
That's right. That's exactly right. And we've had some people gone over, nearly 50 times of entering the contest before actually winning. So it is a matter of persistence, and we will discuss that a bit too. But first, let's just get on to your mother was a wonderful person. I adored her. She was great. She loved root beer, and every time she came out here, I always bought her a whole different, veritable plethora of types of root beers. And even on the Crystal Singer, she described in her book saying, she thanked me for all the hires and the other root beers that I'd gotten for her over the years. But what was it like to walk into her shoes and take over Pern?
Well, you can't really take over. We, in 2000, Mom had a heart attack. And then that was in the fall. In the spring of 2001, she had a stroke. It took us a while to realize what the stroke had done to her. It kicked out her short-term memory, which is really bad. But we realized at that point that we were on golden time, that every day was precious. We didn't know when we would lose her. So we made the best of it. And Mom and I had talked about collaborating. And so we collaborated on Dragon's Kin and went on to do several more. It was quite interesting. She was leery, shall we say, of letting anybody else play with her characters because she knew them so well, and I understood that. So I worked us into the third pass on Pern, which is an entirely different place in the Pern time frame from where Lessa is, who was all the way up in the ninth pass on Pern. It's like 2,000 years in the past. But we had a marvelous time doing that, and we established a few collaborative ground rules. Number one was let the New York Times bestselling author win. And then the other one was let your mother win. So mostly we had a great time. It was fun. It was incredibly bonding. It was golden time.
Yeah.
So she was always. One of the big things and one of the reasons Mom became a judge for the Writers of the Future is she said, don't just return a favor, pass it on. And so part of her being a judge was passing it on to future writers. And we try to live up to that legacy.
That's actually very, very good. She was so adamant about that. And she was also very adamant about being a judge. And she definitely had no problem sharing her mind on the fact that, I think she was the first female judge for the contest. And this was, at that point, that was in 1986 when she became a judge the second year, and was very proud of it, but has also made it very clear that this is for everybody. And that's been something that, Mr. Hubbard's had all along wanting to be able to do, but she helped to make sure that in the here and now, even with him having passed, that she was going to make sure that his wishes that it was for everybody really was held true.
Yeah.
So anyway, I got to your preamble now on whatever you want to call you're doing with Pern. You're not taking it over. You're assuming guardianship, or you have tackled, because your sister also writes into Pern Universe too.
Yes, Gigi's written Dragon's Code, and that is the latest Pern book. Actually, going back, Mom and I wrote 3 solo books in the third pass, and Mom and I wrote 5 collaborations. And by that time, that had been nearly 10 years. And so she said, and I agreed, that we needed to take a break or we wouldn't be fresh. And so we did. And unfortunately, before we could get back to work, she passed away. But the Pern universe is a very special place. There's a lot of room to tell stories, and I would like to see more of them. Mom, however, was adamant in her will that she only wanted Gigi and I to write on Pern. So, we're still working on that. I also had discovered several stories that I wanted to tell, and I have been doing that a lot. And then, of course, I met up with the Winter Twins, and everything changed. But we still look at Pern and love it. I know the fans would love to see more. They'd love to see Mom write more books, but that's just not possible.
Did she have any other outlines for any other stories, Pern stories that were locked in some safe that all of a sudden is going to get found out, like what happened with Herbert?
Who was the author who magically had stuff discovered well after they passed? Somebody was waiting for the ink to dry or something like that. No, she was working on one, but by that time she'd had a number of medical issues hitting her. She'd had, more than just the one stroke. It wasn't working. So we've sort of looked at that and looked at what she wanted to do with that, but we haven't moved forward with it yet because we've spent a lot of time recovering. And, for me, I've got a lot of third pass stories I'd still like to tell. And there's a number of other stories there, but there's nothing hiding in a vault waiting for us to go, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
It's just not there.
Just had to ask.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now how many books have you, so you said you wrote 5 books with Anne?
We collaborated on 5 books in the third pass. That'd be Dragon's Kin, Dragon's Fire, Dragon Harper. Now I have to slip over a bunch of books. Wait a minute, I'm missing somebody. Dragon's Time, Sky Dragons, and no, that's all 5.
Okay.
Yep.
And then how many have you written now since on your own?
Oh gosh, the number's becoming insane.
Oh,
And I'm
it's
kind of
that many. Okay.
well with the Winter Twins, we have 20 in the Twin Soul series. We have one standalone novel, The Magpie's War, which is sort of awaiting the start of a sequel. We have one nonfiction book, The Right Path World Building. I have three more, and I've got a fourth out with alpha readers right now. So it's kind of like 30. And I wave my hands when I say that. Amazon tries to tell me that I've got 84 imprints out there. It's counting things where I have short stories and things and so on. And it's kind of like, well, that's a very flattering number. But, I tend to say I've got at least 30 books out.
Okay. Well, that's pretty nice.
Thank
And
you.
now you publish with all the Dragon Riders that's all with, or all the Pern series, that's all with Del Rey?
Yes, it's with Penguin Random House Del Rey.
Okay, good. So that's pretty much, you just have that locked in, and that's you're good to go on that as long as they're alive and kicking as a publishing house.
Hopefully. Yep.
Okay. So that's on the Dragon Rider side. Now on the I guess I'd call them the indie side, working with the Winter Twins. So how does that work then? It's obviously you've got a good gig going there with Del Rey, but on the indie side how does that work?
Well, it's really interesting. When you're writing in the indie world, you are your own publisher. So you're not just the author anymore. You've also got to be the person that puts the book up on wherever you want it to be. You have to understand formatting. You better have an editor or be a really good editor. You have to line up all the fun stuff like get yourself a cover, get yourself first readers. And then when you get the book up, you have to market it. You have to advertise it. You have to let people know what's happening. So this adds a whole bunch more. On the other hand, it gives you a greater amount of freedom. I am almost embarrassed about the number of times I've changed covers on books now because I can do it so easily. Also, if somebody tells me, hey, there's a typo in your book, I can actually change it within about 24 hours, which is something with the traditional publishing world you just can't do.
Right.
And the other thing is the traditional publishing world, because of what it has to do and where it lives, it pays a lower royalty amount than the independent. Now, on the other hand, with the independent world, you generally tend to charge a lower price because you don't have that huge marketing machine behind you. But it is quite possible as an independent to be your own boss and to totally make a decent living. It does require work and it requires persistence, but being a writer always requires work and persistence. And if there's one thing that every author I've ever met says is the key to success, it's don't give up.
Right.
So we set up the Winter Twins. Really, they were at the very early forefront of the whole independent publishing movement. They were back in the dinosaur age, as it were. They published 12 years ago now, and when they did that, they had to find a printing house that would print their books. They had to warehouse them. They brought them to Comic-Cons and places and sold them that way. And then finally, when we got Kindle and KDP and all these other ebook things, they could put their books up on ebooks, but they were available before ebooks were a thing. So they sort of started way back in the Stone Age and came forward, which was an entirely different world from where we are now. There are so many helpful tools to get you published. Also, there's the latest one from Amazon called, if I got it right, Vella, which allows you to publish shorter works and get paid for it. So you could write short stories and novellas and so on. So the world has become huge and open, and you now find yourself in the same problem that everybody has found themselves in, which is how do you get noticed in this crowd of people?
Correct. And from what I've observed, at least up until a year and a half ago, the Winter Twins, and once you connected with them yourself as well, conventions was a major tool that was used to meet people. You had the booths there, plus all the different panels and stuff. Was that that seemed to be like a really good way to get yourself known and to be able to sell your wares?
I'm still evaluating that. You can sell at a convention, maybe 300 copies of a book if it's a really good book and you're lucky. And you can sell you can sell a number of books, but you kind of want to be selling 300 books a week. And so conventions aren't going to quite do that. They do give you visibility. They're a marketing tool. I like to see them as a selling tool. I like to go to a convention and believe that I'm going to make a profit doing it. And it's very hard to sit there and say, okay, I saw 1,000 people at this convention, at this comic convention, and that means that I've sold so many books because I saw them. Very hard to translate that back into something you can go ahead and put a figure on. So, you're shooting in the dark a little bit with that. But some of those people will become your lifelong fans. And lifelong fans are gold. They're the people that will buy your next book and your next book. They're the people that will stop people in their tracks and say, you got to read this, which is what every author wants to hear. And that's the sort of stuff that starts what we call viral marketing. People go, oh, wow, in a hole in the ground, there lived a hobbit, from J.R.R. Tolkien's The Hobbit, that sort of stuff where people are just quoting things at you. The litany against fear from Dune, which has become, used by so many people now. So it certainly helps. I'm sort of not, I don't know the magic. I think the magic, somehow you make your book go, international USA Today bestseller. That's a formula that everybody's trying to find and nobody's got.
Yeah. I mean, one thing that we try to do from Galaxy Press is attend conventions, and we obviously try to break even at least on the cost of doing the convention. But the main thing we go for is capturing identities. People like you're talking about, they're getting that lifelong fan. If you get somebody to buy the book and they give you their identities, then that gives you the ability to continue to market them, because we have a lot more books than that one or two they're going to buy at a convention. Yep. That gives us the opportunity to pitch them. And then all the new releases, all the new Riders of Future books that we come out with, that gives them the ability to purchase that. And so that's at least the concept for us. And a lot of other direct marketers, they like to go to the conventions so that they can then get either subscriptions for their product line or get an identity so they can continue to market to them afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, it's clear that the comic conventions, as they were pre-pandemic, were a great way to gain legitimacy. Mm-hmm. If you had a booth there, you were seen as at least somewhat real and credible. It was also, writing is a hard job, and a lot of times you're in a dark room by yourself trying to make sense of a world that nobody else has seen. And being out there and finding fans or having fans come up to you and tell you how much they liked your work is stuff you stoke up. That's fuel you store up for the darker days. And that can be invaluable.
Yeah.
So that's really worth it.
Yeah, I think that's just an important aspect to it, because if you're going to go independent, you do need to pick up all these different hats that a regular publisher, which you're paying for that with your reduced royalty, but they're covering all those other things ostensibly, that need to be done to sell your books. But if you do it yourself, you have much more cause on getting a result, provided you actually do what needs to be done and know what you're doing and actually do it.
Now, there's a group in this line or in this vein called 20 Books to 50K. Craig Martell and Michael Anderle are the powerhouses behind it. The thesis is that if you publish 20 books and they're good books and you do everything else, you should be able to see $50,000 a year in income, hopefully net, not gross.
Right.
And they have founded a huge organization, or really it's an association of like-minded people, and they swap success stories and ways of doing things. They have an annual convention in Las Vegas. They have a few others around the world, but the big one is 20 Books to 50K Las Vegas, which is coming up in November. For people who are working in the Writers of the Future vein, my suggestion would be win the Writers of the Future. And then if you're thinking of being an independent publisher, check out 20 books to 50K. I wouldn't try doing it the other way, but also, I mean, if you're multi-talented and you're writing so many words and you've got novels in the back corner, you may want to do that. You may want to look into 20 books to 50K and look at what happens. But one of the things that's come out of the whole indie movement is people don't need agents anymore. People don't need major publishers anymore. They can still make an awfully good living, sometimes better than if they went through the traditional publishers. The world is changing.
That's interesting. So I've done lots of interviews talking with people about this, but you're the first one that's come out just like in so boldly with that premise there. So
I'm looking at so way back in 1990 or so, or maybe it was even 86, I toyed seriously with the idea of quitting my day job and trying to find a way to make electronic books because I thought that was the wave of the future. Now we may, flash forward to 2021. Oh, look, I'm right. But I wasn't Jeff Bezos and I didn't have the capital to do it. And so that didn't happen. But the point being that this has changed the world. This has changed everything. Right. Anybody who is willing to do the work, and it can be some work, can get published these days. The barrier to entry to becoming a published author is so incredibly low. Really, it's, the reason you don't do it is because A, you don't have the book yet, or you're allowing yourself to fail. And because that barrier to entry is so low, we're having an explosion of printed material that we can read. We still have the problem of finding the printing material we like the most. Everybody's different. One of the things that 20 books to 50K shows off is there's a large, broad swath. There's range for everybody. I've been doing some research, and along the way, I discovered, much to my surprise, that George Martin's Game of Thrones, the first book, what was it, A Song of Ice and Fire?
Yeah.
It took 15 years before it got on the New York Times bestseller list. It was published 15 years before it got up there. And part of the reason it got on the bestseller list was because of the TV series. But persistence pays, right? Again, so when you get into, if you say, I'm going to become a full-time writer, I would suggest you consider that that's something that's going to take about 5 years to actually start becoming something where you can give up the day job.
Right.
It takes that sort of persistence. Also, if you walk in there knowing that it's going to take you 5 years or even 15 years, you can plan accordingly. And I think that's really huge. But today, the barriers to entry as an author, they're not the old ones. They're not I have to find an agent. Oh, the agent has to go submit it to a publishing house. Oh, the editor at the publishing house has to put their reputation on the line to get you published. Oh, and so on and so on and so forth. The advantage of that old school way was there were a lot of people who signed off on that particular literary work before it got on bookshelves. The disadvantage was there were a lot of people along the way who could say no. So, what you get in the independent world is you get the ability to do what you want, but you have to understand that a lot of what everyone wants is going to involve making mistakes along the way.
Correct.
So, but I would say, yeah, if you want to, don't let the I have to get an agent, I have to find a publisher stand in your way. I would recommend against that these days.
Okay. Well, that's a good thing to know. Now, when you write your books with the Winter Twins, because obviously the ones that are going to go through Del Rey, you have a universe you're contributing to. As long as you're consistent to that and true to that, that's going to continue just to roll along there. But on your indie published books, how much do you do SEO in terms of titles or putting certain keywords or phrases in the chapter titles, or as you're writing the book? Does that play a factor at all if you're counting on Google and analytics to be able to help spring you along?
I'm not counting on Google and Analytics to help me spring me along. Google and Analytics are so far from my potential readers that they're useless. I've played with a couple of things. There's something called draft2digital.com that allows you to upload your books and converts it to ebooks and markets it to many markets, including Kobo, Nook, Amazon, Apple, long list. They take a 10% royalty off the top, but they put it everywhere for you. Conversely, you can go what we call narrow, and you can just go with Amazon.com. Amazon will allow you to put up your ebook, to get print books up there. Now they've got a beta program to do hardcovers. You can use Audible ACX to actually record books and put them up. And you can also enroll in this thing called Kindle Unlimited. Kindle Unlimited with Amazon requires that you not be distributed anywhere else. So you have to work with Amazon. You can't put it up on Nook. You can't put it up on Kobo. There's a trade-off. Some people believe that going wide, going to all these different platforms, is more remunerative than just sticking with Amazon and locking yourself, quote, locking yourself into a monopoly. But you're not really. You can get out of there pretty quick. My personal experience when I tried the experiment was that Draft2Digital was not working as well for me as going with Kindle Unlimited. With Kindle Unlimited, you get paid by the page read. And you get some people, they may not complete the book, but they may read, 70 pages out of 88 or 200 out of 300 pages or something. You get paid for all the pages they read. And right now, that's pulling in about, for my own personal Foxray books, it's pulling in maybe a third of the money I'm making.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like, okay. And certainly for what we're doing, oddball, well, as the Winter Twins and Todd McCaffrey, yeah, close to the same. We're actually making a little bit more on selling ebooks than we are on Kindle Unlimited, but it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So you have this other opportunity. And then the advantage of that is Amazon allows you to do Amazon ads. So you can advertise, you can set up targeted ads to the potential people who are going to click on the buy the book or download the sample or I want to read the Kindle Unlimited. So you're much closer to your audience with that.
Right.
And that's an awful lot better than SEOs or anything else, because the people who are looking for books aren't going to be looking for my website. More than anything, they're going to go to Amazon and say, I want to read something. Now, a lot of times they say, I want to read something McCaffrey, and that's where they find me. It's been kind of like, what? But I put all these great little blurbs and everything out and all this stuff, and they're going, what's the latest by McCaffrey? Which is, I like that.
For sure.
But it means that at some level that audience is already locked. I'm not finding new people who are, if they're searching for McCaffrey, I'm finding people who are either looking for books by my mom, me, or my sister. They're not looking for different things. So they're an existing audience, and you always need to grow your audience. What is it? 65% of all customers are returning customers. That 35% are new customers, and you want to keep on growing your market, so you got to find those new 35s.
Exactly.
Anyway,
exactly.
Yeah, we could talk about marketing for hours because it's something I'm trying to learn.
Well, this is something also that a lot of people are interested in on how does it work, because there's a lot of people. You go to Amazon, there's a lot of books out there. Like they got 0 reviews, 1 review. They've got, it hurts seeing that, and like things that they could actually do. I've not read the story to know if it's any good or not, but in giving the benefit of the doubt that it is a good story and somebody's gone through and done some editing to it, so it's not chock-a-block full of typos and poor grammar, then there's got to be some tools they can use that can get it so that people will know and they can build that audience. And if they start off with 0, then it's going to be 100% new.
Yeah.
But I'm looking on Amazon right now, and I see, I get Kindles. I get the Kindle Unlimited, so I see all these Twin Souls series, the Steamwalker, the Magpie's War. I get those all. The Kindle edition, I get them all at 0 because I'm Prime member, and so I get all that. But otherwise, there's $7.99 to buy, $9.99 to buy. So how does that work then in terms of yourself making money on your books?
Are you talking about how do we split this or what happened?
Yeah.
Okay, so a couple things. With Amazon, you can set your royalty rates. Typically, people go for the ebooks with the 70% royalty rate, and Amazon will charge you for a certain amount for downloading the actual bytes to somebody's Kindle.
Uh-huh.
And they take their profit off the top. So you get your profit after that. But you roughly, if I say I'm selling a book for $8, that means I'm making $5.60. That's coming to me. That's actually it's $7.99 by 0.7, so it's a little bit less than that. But for a ballpark number, you're looking at maybe $5 a piece.
Right.
Now, because we are a group of writers, we split that 3 ways. But even so, it gives you an idea. I mean, and then you get the huge arguments. If I lower the price, now with the Twin Soul books, they're small, they're novelettes basically and novellas.
Right.
So because of that, we priced them down. We spent some time experimenting, and we found that the $2.99 price point for those books is working really well. For the Magpies War, we have it.
Yeah, we only released $7.99. Yeah, it was
yeah, it's at $7.99. And we're looking at that. One of the things you can do is you can do Amazon has this cool thing called a countdown deal. So you can sit there and send out to everybody and publish online and say, hey, for so many days, this book is going to be 99 cents. And, you can get sales boosted that way. Obviously, while you're selling it for 99 cents, you ain't making that much money. But the idea is, again, people who have never seen your books might be more inclined to try.
Right.
And this is something I'm still learning because with a Kindle book, you can always download a sample. So why you wouldn't download a sample of something that's got you a little bit intrigued and just read that instead of saying, well, I'm only going to buy it if it's 99 cents. And there's stuff on Amazon that's permanently free. I don't know. I know some people swear by this notion of giving your first book away for free. And then people will pick up your series and go on. It's an experiment I haven't tried yet.
So what's the system you got now? You say you've got this other thing that Amazon does now?
Which one? You mean Amazon
ads?
The
sample?
Oh yeah, every time you go to Amazon, if you look at a book, I mean this has always been there. If you go look at an ebook, well, for that matter, with a book. With a book, you can get a look inside. If you go to an ebook, you get a look inside.
Oh, the look inside covers that.
Look inside. Yeah, that's part of it. But also there's send a free sample. Right now, the way Amazon's got it set up, if you look to the right side of an Amazon listing for a book, you'll see Kindle Unlimited, you'll see buy now with one click, you'll see buy for others, and then underneath that there's a little box that says send a free sample and where to deliver it to. So you can get a free sample of a book sent to you. You like it, you can go ahead and buy it. You don't like it, you don't have to buy it. And I think that's a really good thing. Amazon's had that for forever. But I think it's a really great way for people to say, okay, do I like this book or not? Again, if you're a Kindle Unlimited member, you get to kind of do the same thing.
Yeah.
You get to read the whole book if you like it, and you're paying for so many pages a month or whatever it is. So that can be really useful. The other thing that Amazon has is it has the ability to set up an account to do advertising. And that's kind of like a whole world in its own right. Actually, if you look, I'm going to get myself an example book here to look at. If you look at selling books, because of these marvelous people in 20 books to 50K, there's a lot of stuff they talk about how to do it. You know this, you've been in the business long enough, but the first thing in order to sell a book, ebook or otherwise, the first selling thing you've got is your cover.
Yeah.
So your cover should give people, they should tell them what genre it's in just by looking at it. In this case, I'm looking at a copy of the Jupiter game. And the Jupiter game has the planet Jupiter. It has some sort of spaceship that we can see in Jupiter, and it has somebody in a spacesuit in the foreground. So we know, just looking at this, that this is something to do with science fiction. straight off, and we can guess that the woman in this spacesuit is one of the characters in the story. And so, I mean, the purpose of a cover is to get you to pick up the book and then turn it over and look at the back at the ad copy on the back,
Right.
The blurb. And you read that and you go, do I like this or not? And then maybe you look inside, or you say, if you're at a Comic-Con or something like that, you hold the book over to somebody, say, how much is this? And if it's too much, you say, oh, no, thanks. And if it's not, you say, yeah, I'll try it. And that's sort of those are techniques that as an independent author, you have to learn more. This is where the traditional publishers shine, in that they have whole departments dedicated to figuring out what sort of cover works for what sort of genre, and what sort of stuff to put on the back cover or even the front cover to help the book sell. So this is a whole bunch, and it's a very different skill set from straight author, see Jane, she Jane run, that sort of stuff, actually writing a story. It's a different way. You have to think of things like taglines, something that just grabs somebody and they say, oh, what's going on here? What did I do? I had first contact. Aliens have reached out. That's in bold. Okay, so that's kind of the tagline. That for this book, that tells you what's going on. And then more, enough for you to either be able to make a choice as to whether you want to read this or not.
Right.
Now, the people in the 20 books to 50K, there's a whole bunch of different independents there. There are a lot of them who have looked at this whole side of the world, and they've published a lot of books, and they do workshops and classes on it. Dean Wesley Smith and Christine Cashman Rush, of course, who are also fellow judges, have done a whole bunch of workshops, both on improving your craft and working in the world of independent authors. So they've got some really amazing stuff out there. And I look at them, I'm sort of the opinion that if I read a book and I get like for marketing or selling or any of that realm, and I get one good idea out of it, then it was worth all the time. Because I don't believe I know everything.
Right.
And I'm still learning and still trying. I mean, I guess one of the other tricks would be to have a good set of guidelines for when I'm successful, and what does that look like? Is that when you're Jeff Bezos? Is that when you're, when you've bought your own mansion at Malibu? What is your success criteria? Is it you can just pay your bills? I don't know. Everybody's got different things. And there's more than one thing on the list. Some people may say, well, I want to win an Illustrators of the Future award. And other people may say, I want to win a Writers of the Future award. And still others may say, well, I want to be a #1 New York Times bestseller. By the way, if you want to become a #1 New York Times bestseller, independent is not the way to go. The New York Times does not really deal with independence too much. The best you can get a USA Today best-selling author, because USA Today actually looks at this stuff, but not our buddies in the New York Times, at least now.
Yes. Yeah.
All
right. So then, a lot of people listening to this, because this is the Writers and Illustrators of the Future podcast, are very much interested on, okay, I've got a story. What do I do? How to make it go? So this has been fascinating on, because you're able to play both sides of the coin here as an author. So that makes you one of those rare perspectives to be able to interview and just to get
well, to be fair, this has been going on for a while. I'm kind of late to the game. We call ourselves hybrid authors. We're kind of like the Prius of the universe. But actually, Kevin Anderson and Rebecca Mesta are also hybrid authors. Dean and Chris are hybrid authors. There's a lot of hybrid authors wandering around out there. It's becoming more and more. This it's nice when you can have a major publisher who's publishing at least some of your stuff. But there are people who are making insanely good livings who have never been seen by a major publisher. There are also people who started off as hardcore independents and got picked up by major publishers. Andy Weir would be an example. An earlier example would be Christopher Paolini.
Yeah.
you know? So the world is changing, and it's getting quite interesting how it changes. Now, there's another thing I should say about Amazon. This is a shameless plug. Um, but if you go to Amazon and you look for Sky Dragons, 2 words, the last book that Mom and I co-authored together, you will see that it is listed as an editor's pick best science fiction and fantasy book,
Wow,
which is another.
congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm thrilled. It's another tag recognition
Yeah.
that helps sell your books. The other thing is there are Amazon does rankings. They do rankings in different categories. So if you're into fantasy adventure fiction, that may be one category. If you're looking at in the UK, the teen and young adult steampunky books, you'll see that Winter Wyvern, the first of the Twin Soul books, is listed as number 5 right now, if you do it at this very instant. We've been pottering around there for a while. There's a different, in the US, it will actually have a slightly different ranking, obviously. In the US, where are we today? We're number 27 in teen and young adult steampunk ebooks. So obviously that's something else to think about. You may discover that you have a bigger audience in the UK than you do in the US. You may get more sales out of that, even though the nation itself has got a smaller population. So there's a lot of amazing room in this world of independence. And I really wouldn't have gotten into it. Well, I was kind of into it, but I really got into it a lot because of my exposure with the Winter Twins.
Yeah. So how did you actually connect up with them?
Writers of the Future. They were guest presenters at one of the 2016 event.
We had just met them at WonderCon. Kevin Anderson introduced us to them, and then the relationship blossomed immediately. And then we invited them to be guest speakers. So that's amazing.
Well, they have this amazing problem. They're both gorgeous. They're both small. They're like 5 foot, and they look very young. So everybody sees them. They go, "Oh, this is a drop dead gorgeous girl," and very few people spend the time to discover how amazingly intelligent they are. They're genius class.
Yeah.
So they have this marvelous thing where people will look at them because they're so gorgeous, and then make the mistake of thinking that that's all they can see. I got into a conversation with Britt about art, and she was showing me some of her art, and I showed her some of my art. And we both agreed that we should be doing more art. And that's actually where it all started. And then I discovered that they only lived half an hour from where I lived. I thought, ooh, writers group. And we got together and we hung out a lot. And somewhere along the line, they had the idea that it'd be really cool to collaborate with, the famous New York Times bestselling author Todd McCaffrey. And I got the idea that it'd be really cool to collaborate with these amazingly vibrant, smart young people. And with great trepidation one day, I said, "Hey, have you ever thought about collaborating?" And they were like, "Yes, thank you. That'd be so cool. We've been afraid to ask you." So that's kind of where we started. And then it's been really fun. One of the things is the twins have been writing together since before they could speak. They have a lot of really cool, amazing ideas. And they learn to separate their egos from the story. They're not saying, "Oh, this is my character. You can't do this to it," or "Oh, that's my character." They work together to try and build the best stories possible. It's a leave your egos at the door writing style. And I was very interested in doing the same thing. And since we'd all been writing, it was very easy for us to go ahead and just leave our egos at the door and work toward a good story. Brianna had some ideas she wanted to explore. One of which was she had this great starting line. She said it was, "Crea was bored, and when she was bored, bad things always followed." And of course, that is the first line to Winter Wyvern. And she had some more ideas, some of which are still kind of in the backstory that we're not going to release until the story gets more developed. But there were a lot of things we wanted to look at. We wanted a world where there were gods that walked among men. We have a world where certain magical creatures require two souls to exist. One is the animal part, and the other is the human part. And the winter wyvern is one of those. And that allowed us to tell this really cool story. And when we were done, we published it and we got it out there. And I thought, So the start of this story, we find out before the story actually starts that the first airship ever built, equipped with guns, has fired at a wyvern and a dragon, and Kreia discovers that the wyvern has been hit by the airship. But I wanted to tell the story from the airship point of view, and that's how we get Cloud Conqueror, the second book. And things just kind of went on from there. And we know easily that with these books, because they are shorter books, we can probably write for the next 20 years and not exhaust this magical world we've invented. And so we love that. And that was our first endeavor together. The other thing we did is we built this really amazing world and plot and science for our The Magpie's War, our full-length novel. And we spent 3-4 months in intense discussions, throwing out ideas and playing with stuff. And so instead of having a good idea, we had this marvelous weave of magical thinking and beauty and a whole bunch. You can't see my hands; they're way up high. But we had this. It's this amazing story, and we're totally in love with it. We know where it's going. We have at least the next 2 books outlined in our heads, and probably more. And we had so much fun writing that. So it's been a blast.
Yeah, I've been preparing for this interview where I read the first couple of the Twin Soul series, and I didn't know you wrote steampunk. So I was like, wow. So how did you end up in the steampunk?
Well, we wanted a magical world, but I wanted a magical world that was getting more technologically advanced, as it were. Not quite. So we have this world where we have flying airships, we have mages, we have wyverns and dragons, and a whole bunch of other creatures. And we were playing with it. It's a pure fantasy world.
Sure.
Which means it kind of breaks the whole steampunk idea. I mean, steampunk is more science fiction usually, and sort of steampunk. When I think of it, I think H.G. Wells and things written in that vein. And this isn't in that vein. This is an entirely different world for that. So we're in a very odd position, which makes it much harder to get people hooked onto our series. Once they're in, I think they're in for a long while. I got people asking me, when is book 21 coming out? And it's this amazing world, and we're only scratching the surface on it right now. But yeah, we're gonna see what we call technology coming up. We have steam engines, we have locomotives, we have steam airships. We're gonna see some more things coming along. But steampunk is actually based on magic. We have lifting spells to make our airship balloons lift the airships. We still have steam engine locomotives to make the propellers turn, but they were started off and built with magical thinking as well. So it's kind of this very odd world mixed together.
Wow. Okay. I thought it was being like, wow, okay, steampunk. It's not steampunk.
Not quite. It falls in steampunk, and the majority of the readers find it in steampunk, but it's sort of steampunk has become a broader field and almost should splinter. It's becoming harder for people. Because some people are looking for steampunk and they're expecting Jules Verne, with things like Around the World in 80 Days and 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. He had everything. He had submarines before there were submarines. He had airships before there were real airships, and he was the originator of a lot of stuff we consider steampunk. But then people came along and expanded steampunk. They said, well, so I'm just hang on, let me go see. Okay, so there's this series by a guy named Dan Willis called The Arcane. The series name is The Arcane Casebook Book. I'm up to book 6. We have a steampunkish world set in New York, in Manhattan, in the 1930s. World War I has happened, but there are sorcerers, there are alchemists, and there are rune rites. And these are the magic, and they do all sorts of fun stuff with that. So you've got this noir detective in a world where we have magic, and he's also a rune rite, so he writes magical spells that way. And, so does that fall into the regular steampunk world? No.
Right.
But it is listed in steampunk fiction. So it's kind of like, it's also listed in paranormal and urban fantasy books. So that's one of the nice things that's happening now. We have such an explosion of talent, such an explosion of possibilities that we're splintering all over the place. Science fiction itself splintered. Really, I think the explosion of science fiction into different categories was probably in the 70s, I'd say, 70s to the 80s. Where we started moving more and more from science fiction in the 20s when it was E. Doc Smith and the Lensmen and all. That was, okay, you got a spaceship, you're going to go someplace. And then all of a sudden you get people like Rogers Lasny writing Lord of Lights. You get you just get this huge proliferation of different things. You get Harry Harrison with the stainless steel rat. The world had changed, and now it's exploded even more partly because we have more people writing.
Yeah.
But it's cool. It makes it harder to find something you want to read, though.
Yes, that's absolutely very, very true. Now we're down to about the last 5-6 minutes or so here. Now, your mom was a great fan of L. Ron Hubbard and remarked very favorably about several of his works, and also just how much she appreciated his having started the Writers of the Future contest back in 1983. Yeah. So, do you have any particular favorite either story or essay? Because you're also with the Writers of the Future contest, and if so, why is that?
He wrote an incredible amount of stuff. I haven't gone through all of it. I got to say that for me, and I saw it only as the marvelous stage play, the Auto Magic Horse was just a ton of fun.
Yeah.
I really, really like that. That's probably my right now top of the list. Now, we also did To the Stars, which was interesting, and some of his side dialogue in that is just amazing. He was talking about I'm going to misphrase it, but he was talking about basically the poor and the unwashed who are grumbling and threatening to overthrow things. And it's like, yeah, that's still the case today, and It was really well done. And of course, I read Typewriter in the Sky, which was just fun. But that's sort of where I am. You guys have those marvelous books that include his whole thing about how he was working out what he was going to write, how much money he was making. In the Great Depression, this guy was making a full living as a writer, and that's going some.
Yeah.
So that's impressive.
So okay, that's a good answer. Thank you for that. Now, in terms of being a judge for the Writers of the Future contest, what do you get? What for you is the most, I guess, the most value you see in the Writers of the Future contest?
Well, there's a couple of ways of looking at the world. For me, I like to say that it's all selfish and self-interest because I'm desperate for good books to read and good stories to read. And so the more I encourage people to enter the Writers of the Future and become story writers, the more stories I have to read. The reality is that, it's an amazing opportunity. It's the best opportunity as a new writer of science fiction or fantasy that you can find. You're being judged only on the quality of your work. Your name is removed before it's sent to the judges, so we don't know who you are. We're just looking at the words you put on the paper for the story you wanted to tell. And that's huge. And I'm glad that this is amazing. This is a classic example of, don't just return a favor, pay it on. And this is paying it on massively. We know that a lot of our current judges were past winners of the Writers of the Future, which to me is kind of, that says it all right there. Dr. Nnedi Okorafor, for example, would be one of our shining examples. It's just, this is something worth doing. And it's a great way to learn the craft. You write a story, you submit it once every 3 months, you keep on doing it until somebody sends you a lot of money and a plane ticket to Hollywood. What could go wrong?
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's, and especially right now with the way that the pandemic's hit, it's even made it harder for the arts to be to really accelerate within the arts because the schools aren't there to help you along, and
yeah,
it's definitely something but for either the writer or the artist contest. All right, so
hang on. I was going to add. The other thing that's out there that's at least to my way of thinking relatively new, it may have been there for a while and I just missed it, is the forums. There's a lot of some of the past winners are out there helping new people and offering critique, help, support, and everything in becoming a Writers of the Future winner and becoming an Illustrator of the Future winner. And so you have this beautiful community of people who are trying to make things better, and you get a lot of help there.
Exactly. That's the Writers of the Future forum. That can be found at writersofthefuture.com. And just for people who don't know, writersofthefuture.com is pretty much a one-stop shop for all things Writers of the Future. You've got the forum, there's the podcast, there's a blog, there's the Writers of the Future online writing workshop. All these things are free. So we got something for everybody to help you along as a writer. And it doesn't mean you have to write science fiction or fantasy, because a lot of the tools for how to write a story are the same cross-genre. And a lot of our past winners for the contest have gone on to other genres that they're writing in. So anyway, so now, Todd, for someone who's not familiar with your works, what would you recommend as a Todd McCaffrey primer?
Oh, gosh. I'm one of these people who likes to write, as they say, broad. My mother was the same, really. Mom is known for the Dragon Riders of Pern, but she also wrote the Tower and the Hive series. She wrote The Ship Who Sang, which is a collection of shorts turned into a novel. She had a huge bunch of books. She also wrote the Freedom series, which is a ton of fun. So at some level, it's kind of like, well, what do you like to read? If you like an alternate history, which is young adult in nature, then you should look at the Steamwalker. If you're curious about first contact with aliens and you like a humorous slant, you should go look at the Jupiter Game. If you're interested in what the first artificial intelligence might be like and not an evil monster, I highly recommend L.A., which used to be called City of Angels, but unfortunately pretty much every book in existence has been called City of Angels once at a time. But L.A., the first AI, was the last book of mine that my mother read. And she said to me at the time when I said, well, what do you think? She says, I think you've got a blockbuster there. And I said, well, can I quote you on it? And she said, but I'm your mother. And so I have not, notice how I have very carefully quoted her on it without officially quoting her on it.
That's very
Sneaky.
good.
Yeah. So it's a big book because it's a big subject, but I'm still very proud of it. And it is the only one so far that has been made available as an audiobook because I am the voice for the audiobook. So there are those three. If you're interested in quick reads, they're a lot of fun. Go check out the Twin Soul series, starting with Winter Wyvern, or because we knew people would want to do this, there's an omnibus version of the first 5 books, Twin Soul series Omnibus 1.
Which is what I'm reading right now.
Oh, yeah, good.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, that's it's interesting because we took, basically we've taken a bunch of comic length things and slapped them together. But yeah, that's a lot of fun. We're looking at the at ways we can maybe make this more approachable. Because we started off talking about Kreia and her journey, and then we spent the next 2 books talking about Captain Ford and his journey, which is for some people probably what they call in the field an eyeball kick. So we're actually looking at producing a Kreia's journey, which is the first 4 or 5 books dealing with Kreia alone, or dealing with Kreia as the central character. But so we're having fun with this series. I would, check that one out. If you want a magical murder mystery set in the aftermath of World War I, and using the Magpie's rhyme, then you should check out the Magpie's War. We're pretty proud of that one too.
Well, that's great. So I've really enjoyed this conversation. It was, it took a direction that I wasn't really planning on, but I'm really glad we went into on marketing, really be able to how to market yourself as a writer going through the indie route. So this has been a really, really fun interview. I'm so glad that you took the time to help clear out some of the different points for the aspiring writers to be able to learn more about it.
Well, thank you very much. It's been an interesting learning experience.
Yes, no doubt. And thank you for listening. Subscribe to the Writers and Illustrators of the Future podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We've also been syndicated on the United Public Radio Network, where you can find these podcasts as well by just typing in Writers of the Future. Again, thank you very much, Todd.
You're welcome. Thank you.